welcome. Thank you.
Probably start that.
Yeah, go ahead, start the recording. So anyway, we actually have several people who are co-coordinators with us this evening. We have Wesley Kirkland, who's one of our co-coordinators. We have Brad Hillis, right? We have Mr. Andy Cowell over here who has joined us.
We have Jonathan that was.
Yeah, Jonathan was here and he's supposed to join us at some point.
If he doesn't fall.
He called me. He called me and said he was going to join. So anyway, Jonathan Evans is going to join. But if you have any questions whatsoever about LAPSA, you can grab one of these guys and talk to them, or of course, we've got Aaron Hahn. Yeah, you do.
Well, technically, you count for other companies.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys still can hold the charter, so I guess it's not that.
We still, yeah, he represents the LAPSA National Board. We're an affiliate of LAPSA. We're still an affiliate. Right, exactly. We're still affiliated with LAPSA. Right, excellent.
The only difference is in order to have our own 501c3 so that we could be a tax write-off for other people, we had to form an organization separate from LAPSA, which is called.
So VTI might be eligible for the raffles. Literally one choice.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for bailing out that one time. That was a nice prize.
So before we begin, do we have announcements? I know that there's something going on out there in the world that needs to be announced here. Somebody's hiring.
I was gonna say, we used to announce jobs, but there's so many that don't know it matters anymore.
Oh, I was supposed to have my company's on it.
Your company's hiring. Tell us about your company.
Oh, Teledyne FLIR, so we make radiation devices, but actually will be, they haven't quite announced it yet, but they're supposed to be if it gets approved. They're looking for anywhere from an embedded to C# developer, looking for one more person on their team to help us.
Okay.
Which is,
You guys using a recruiter? I've just seen a few embedded job postings on Knoxville Slack.
I don't know. That one I couldn't answer. Or they're about to do another hire, so. Because I got projects coming in and we don't have enough people for them, so.
It's the way of the world.
Yes.
It's Jason, right?
Yep.
Okay, so see Jason if you guys, anyone interested, or if you know of anyone interested.
You actually sent me the JD link. I want to send it to someone.
Well, I don't have a link yet. Like I said, I don't think they've even technically, it's not been posted yet because they're still waiting to get it approved. So,
Okay.
but
Are you on the Knoxville Slack?
nope.
Might join the Knoxville Slack. There's a hiring check.
Yeah, you can post that link there too. So, yeah, whenever it presents itself. Well, if there are no further announcements.
Oh, I have one.
Oh, you got, yeah.
If you have an interest in free Spanish lessons, my company Stratusgrid is hiring. Cloud engineers, fully remote. I'll never even have to see your face. Except on the video, but whatever. But we'll pay for you to learn Spanish too. It's pretty cool.
Interesting. I mean, not for me, but had a couple of Colombian students come through the Knoxville lunches.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, we actually have an office in Columbia too.
Okay. Yeah, get you in touch.
Cool. Other announcements?
It's going out and networking. That's what we're here for, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
By the way, my fee is 5%.
Okay, David.
Recruiter underneath.
Yeah. Hey, I am way too familiar with copyright.
It is.
Yeah.
Can't follow the money.
All right. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it off to our speaker this evening. Tech Systems, they left.
Yeah, but we still have to thank.
Well, we said, yeah, we're going to thank you, Tech Systems. And thank you guys out in the world right now. Tech Systems, can we give a round of applause to our pizza providers right this evening?
This has been good to us for many years.
Yes, for a long
Yeah,
time. Absolutely.
I appreciate it. And they are hiring all the time too.
I know, we're, but there's a lot of folks that are out of town this week still. So
There's a holiday?
can you believe it?
I know.
Yeah.
Slackers.
Yeah.
We're totally stalling for time on my talk right
Yeah. So I'm not gonna stall anymore. I'm gonna hand it off. Well, thanks. You can talk about whatever you want to,
What about?
or the topic that you've chosen. So
Oh,
how about it?
thanks.
everybody, Wesley Kirkland.
I need to get my phone shut it all up apparently.
Land more.
Well, I'm using them as a presenter screen too. So first off, this is literally, I think, the biggest group we've had in a couple of years now. So thanks everyone for coming out. This is awesome. I will say, please forgive me on this talk. I wrote it in 3 hours while sitting in bed last night. There was not a lot of time.
Better than a spontaneous. Yeah, YouTuber. I mean, our previous speaker fell through. That's.
Yeah. But anyways, so how many people think that the cloud actually backs up your crap?
Ooh, ouch. Assume the positive here.
You're clearly in management. So anyways, my little nice thing,
I don't need it back.
you and I both survived that great outage. What year was it? Yeah, no, but, so just my little cheat sheet of accomplishments. Kind of a funny thing, my Slack handle at work up until last week was Meme Master of Disaster. I got politely asked to change it, so now it's Kirkland, not Costco. If anyone's familiar with their little brand. But I promise this is actually a legit QR code if you want to follow along to the actual blog post we're going over tonight. It's the Atlassian RCA. And I do want to ask, is anyone actually familiar with this Atlassian RCA? Okay, I know you are, Ben. Okay, so we'll start with that. But as I was saying earlier, the cloud doesn't actually back up anything for you. I don't know if you've ever read Microsoft 365 or what is it, 352 this year right now, how they back up your data. They don't. There's a hard drive here, a hard drive here, and then somewhere in San Antonio, there's a hard drive or two that has your data. That's about it. Doesn't protect you against ransomware, so on and so forth. In Atlassian's case that we're going to be talking about tonight, they actually did have backups, but we'll kind of get into why that's good, why that's bad, so on and so forth. But as Andy was mentioning too, S3, it has what, 11 nines, you said?
It is designed for 11 nines durability.
11, okay. I'm sure Atlassian said that was good enough for them. But anyways,
You know,
and Brandon says,
essentially it's fancy RAID. RAID is not a backup.
that is true. And our remote participant, Brandon, saying backups are to cover their own screw ups and not yours. Even then, flip a coin. And I can tell you in Atlassian's case, I've worked for two companies, one where Atlassian restored backups on the customer's request, and one where Atlassian said, tough luck, you're SOL at that point. But while we're on this, I do actually want to highlight this fancy little ticket here just to see how little that they care about them. Does anyone immediately notice when this ticket was opened? It's still under consideration for automated backups. This is a freaking cloud product that everyone, I guarantee you, all of our companies pay far too much money for at this point. It's not supposed to do that. Anyways, so I don't really have anything here. Like I said, I wrote this at 10 p.m. last night and I wanted it to be funny.
Do they have a plugin where you could back it up on site?
They can. It's called hire a really good intern. That's what I did once before, and we wrote our own backup. They actually, in that Jira ticket, which funny thing, it has so little activity. My asinine comment from 2 years ago is still on the front page. But they have Atlassian Labs on GitHub where they're like, oh, here's a Python script. But all it does is generate a link. So you still have to have an admin go in there once a week and click download. Like that is Atlassian's legitimate backup strategy, is for humans. But Atlassian for Dummies, how to make a global outage 101. That's what we're going to learn tonight. So let's go over some stats here. And since there's only a couple of people familiar, what actually happened, actually we'll get into that in a minute. So this started April 5th this year at, I don't want to translate Eastern time right now, so like 2:38 or whatever. There are 775 total Atlassian customers done or affected, 883 sites deleted. This is all from their post.
Delete.
It's straight up deleted, like they nuked, they took an atomic bomb and then they nuked everyone from there. And what's really interesting.
And I guess really at that point, nobody knew they had deleted things.
Well, so what actually gets even funnier on that, Andy, Atlassian makes you have to have an account to submit a ticket. Guess what you can't do when your crap's deleted? You can't submit a ticket. It's literally like, oh, you have to be logged into ServiceNow to create a ticket. I can't do that when my password doesn't work. But anyways, I just wanted to highlight a couple stats here. And what's really interesting to me is their RTO and RPO. Is everyone familiar with those terms? All right. So they actually met their RPO, which is insane. They also just got freaking lucky because they say it's under 1 hour. So I guess it just hit at the right time. But other,
That RPM means they lost less than an hour's worth of data.
they only lost less than 5 minutes in this case, which is freaking impressive.
Recovery points.
Yeah.
Covered 5 minutes.
Yeah. And then our RTO,
RTO was it that?
no, it's spectacular failure. That's why it's Atlassian redundancy, how to make a global outage. But so here's what happened. On April 5th this year, they ran a routine script. I want to have a meme there, but I didn't want to make one yet. And so Atlassian, if you're familiar with them, they make Jira and Confluence. They also buy up every other product in the world like Trello, and then they screw it up spectacularly. And then they make you pay far too much money, like triple the price that it originally was.
So they're the Broadcom software.
No, I like to think of them as the Dell or EMC too. But anyways, so they have brought this product earlier this year or last year, something called Insight. It's a CMDB. It's not very great. I've used it. It's whatever. But they had the old version, and then they had the new version. And these 883 sites had the old version in it. So what ended up happening here, having to make sure I don't spoil part of this going forth, they said, hey, we want to delete the old version. Well, what's kind of funny is my employer had the old version, the new version. I was a straight up Atlassian admin at the time. I never got an email that they were doing this stuff. So I'm kind of curious what's going on in the change control process. I also should note, like, I'm kind of making fun of Atlassian tonight, but these are all lessons that we can and should learn throughout our career. But so they went through and they deleted this. But yeah, so I can only imagine that's what it looked like. They're in Australia, so the risk of fire is a lot higher, unfortunately. But what this kind of affected was, if we look at it architecturally, and I wish I would have made a diagram for this, but so you have your site ID, and it has Jira, Confluence, Opsgenie, status page, and Insight, and a couple other things. The whole site went away, and they used immutable IDs in this case too, which is already going to cause some problems that we're going to later. But I want everyone to read this, and we're going to play a little trivia after this. So I'll give like 20 seconds or something. Oh crap, I need to freaking share my screen. I'm so sorry, Brandon. And to the recordings in the future. Whoops.
That last sentence, I've seen many of those days.
So everyone got a chance to read it?
So it's like L be removed if you're not careful.
Maybe. So from the previous excerpt, let's ponder. What do you think happened here? Like, from everything that I've talked to right now, how did the entire site get deleted? Anyone want to take a guess? Aaron?
They were trying to deactivate at least the functionality, but it said delete the whole darn thing.
We know that's what happened, but how did they do it?
I mean,
Betting they took.
I'm assuming that there is a select ID
Mhm.
that can refer to multiple types of objects. And I can refer to a specific instance, just the application or system as a whole. And the ID for a system as a whole was used where the individual something else should have been.
Yeah,
Close.
maybe, you got sites, you got apps,
Mhm.
you have subset or use the same ID for both.
Close. Anyone else want to take a guess?
The only other guess would be silly things with shell expansion where you got an empty string. And instead of specifying A/B, you got just A.
So here's the really funny thing. You're both drastically overthinking what actually happened. That's literally what happened. So whenever they ran an action, if the ID equal to map ID, delete. If the ID equal to site ID, nuke all your freaking crap. There was one API endpoint that took both IDs. So when I was at work and I found out about this, I'm like, oh, they're totally like using the same primary key, and it's all in a single table. I was pretty spot on, apparently. Just I didn't think about the API endpoint.
So you just pass to the ID, whatever it is. It'll
Yeah,
do.
it figures it out. And it doesn't, apparently, according to their blog post at the time, it didn't even error out if it wasn't a valid ID, because we can see that based upon it would not have detected the input IDs were incorrect as they did not exist in staging, which is a problem. But so how this actually happened, do what?
I was just reading the releasing the atomic bomb part there.
Yeah, no,
That's great.
it's pretty freaking accurate.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Reading it, one transaction.
Yeah,
So somebody, when they were designing this API, thought, it's so much trouble to specify if it's an app or if it's a site.
I know.
Just, they know what they're doing, just pass the ID in.
Or even tell you that it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I mean, what would you need to do that?
Can I get a freaking 404, man? That's all I want. But anyways,
No. Delete it, it's gone, it doesn't exist, 200.
you should go work for Atlassian. I'm sure they would love you. But so when we actually read into the blog post, and what actually becomes quite interesting is they seem to be siloed from an outside perspective. They talked to the team, and the team at first said, oh, here's the site ID, or sorry, here's the app IDs for the inside instances. Keep in mind, everything's an immutable ID, each app, each site. So they ran it in staging, worked great. And then they ran it in test and production. They ran 30 of them. And it went off great because those 30 were the app IDs. Then some kind of miscommunication happened because silos and organizations, and they sent them the site IDs, and no one bothered to check because they all look the same. Like if you're just using GUIDs across the place, you need to validate this data. So they sent over the wrong one. So I was mentioning about the ticket earlier. They first discovered this 8 minutes after they did it because the customer, I'm assuming, must have had a catch session and they're still able to submit a ticket. I can tell you from personal experience, I was not able to submit a ticket. And what's really funny here is, like most organizations, you keep your customer data, like their CRM data, and I don't know, a real CRM and not Jira. Yeah, turns out it was all attached to metadata, and then they deleted the metadata. So they didn't know how to contact anyone. But their monitoring didn't detect it because it was a routine operation. And that's kind of interesting to me because in the previous company I worked for, they actually monitored customer sites kind of at random, and especially like the more important ones. And I'm kind of curious here from my own perspective, and like what can we learn from an SRE perspective here is, should we monitor actions like that? Should we take like a hey go to Octa's model and say if we're deleting over 20%, granted this is nowhere near 20%, but like even 0.5% at a time, should we do that? Like how can we do this?
I would imagine if I had automation designed to delete a site, I'd delete the monitoring as well. But why would I continue to monitor a site? I just delete.
So they didn't have any monitoring, best I can tell, for that. But I do agree with you. But at the same time, the script that you're running, it's probably just a fancy for each. You could check it in the begin process and say, is there more of these? We'll go check how many sites we have. If we're over X threshold, then we should say, are you sure you really want to do this?
Yeah, but I was just thinking in terms of like monitoring the site.
I don't know, maybe like from my perspective, they could have auto-generated tickets or something. Like there's a couple different ways that we can, in theory, engineer around this. But so We've been harping on the mutable ID stuff. So I don't know what magic they ended up doing in the back end, but all the API keys and everything were recreated. Even though everything had a new immutable ID, most everything seemed to function without failure there. And then their code freeze. I disagree with how late they did this, because they ended up doing it or they ended up issuing a company-wide code freeze to prevent any possible backwards compatibility issues with new releases being done. But they did it almost 3 days later, which seems a little late in my book.
How long did it take them to figure out what they've done?
8 minutes from the time that the initial customer contacted them, but this right here should give you a nice detail. Let me see if I can enlarge that a wee bit. So what we can see here, so at 7:38 p.m. all times are UTC. 7:38, they start running the script. 7:46, customer said, "Hey," and then the script completed, which actually didn't take that long. Like that's a pretty efficient script in my opinion. And then they finally raised major incident here at 8:17, so less than an hour before they updated their status page. But here's what's really interesting. As a customer, you're like, a crack's not there. What am I supposed to do? And you don't really have any recourse because you can't submit a ticket. Your session's already expired, and it's a cloud company based in Australia. They don't work the same hours as us.
Like every other company, they've done everything they can do to obfuscate their phone numbers.
Oh gosh, 100%. I need to just pay for like, what is it, Zoom Info or something. I could have used that a couple of years ago. But so on and so forth. But what's really interesting to me, so all this happened on April 5th. Notice they didn't actually start doing anything until that Friday. And I know they had a reason. I don't know what the reason was at this point. But when I think about this from my perspective, waiting, what are we at? Basically 3 full days, so 72 hours approximately, to start acting seems excessive. Considering they already knew what they had done, and the investigation should have been able to be identified fairly quick, especially considering it was a purpose built to delete the old instances of inside. That should have been change management. So what we should read from this is change management is important, even though personally I'm not a huge fan of it, but either way. But it should have been in an easily accessible area so you can start to identify what happened here. But overall, it took them 14 days from start of incident to end of incident to fully restore everyone's site. And what was really interesting is, I think it's obvious that my company was affected by this. So we had to find out by ourselves and that we were affected, and we didn't really have any recourse. Like, we're not a big company by any stretch of means. We're not paying them $1 million a month. They don't really care about us. But we end up having to email them, and they're like, "Oh, we'll get to you when we get to you." It's like any ETA. And finally, they started taking escalation requests saying, "Well, the customers reached out, we should probably do something about this." What was kind of interesting is I don't fully understand. I kind of understand why they did this, but they offered you 2 restore options. One, restore as is, like your full site, or they could take a longer, more manual approach and restore only select users in your site. So they would give you a printout of your site and users, and you say, "I want these users." And then you can say at a later point in time, do that. I know why my company picked X reason to do it, but I fundamentally struggle to identify why they offered both these options. And I'm kind of curious, like, does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Let's work for them if they have people out for just responding to users they want.
They openly said it was more work for them to do it. Yeah,
When you say use, you're talking about like Atlassian
I do.
users.
Like,
Why would I not want all of my users restored?
Well, I don't know if you got, you haven't updated in a while, maybe there's a lot of old people who don't work for you anymore or something. Like, it could be
Or
that.
you got a lot of public users that are inactive.
Yeah.
so best what I can figure out, Paul's actually pretty spot on there. It was like guest users in your tenant. So that way you could validate everything before you gave access to like external customers or public guest accounts. Just interesting to say the least. I never would have expected the company to offer a purposely more manual approach when they already openly said, our restore process is 100% manual. This has never been done before. Like they restore sites just on a whim from time to time, but that's about it. They've never restored like 800 sites. And actually, like I mentioned, it was on the previous slide, but they finally narrowed it down to like 400 or 500 sites that were actually like paying customers that weren't trials, weren't inactive, and just paid them and weren't owned by Atlassian. Because Atlassian deleted a lot of their own crap too, which is funny. But yeah.
So you paying customers don't have an SLA?
No, we do. Doesn't mean anything. Yeah.
Did you get any SLA credits out of it?
I don't know if I can fully say what we got. I will say it ended up being very nice at the end of the day. But it's not like dealing with an ISP where they're saying, well, it was out for this long, so we're going to calculate your prorated bill. It wasn't that, it was much better. So there's that. I've already kind of talked about all this, but so what's kind of funny from this perspective, my company loves Jira. If it's not in Jira, it doesn't exist. As much as we all love and hate that, I think all of us kind of have a love-hate relationship with Jira. You probably love it too much since you're a developer, though.
Hey, for what it's worth,
Not
we
anymore.
recently had a conversation with the AWS professional services project managers. I asked him, like, what's the alternative to Jira? He said,
Service now.
Yeah, no, it's kind of one of those things you're stuck in using. There's Asana, which seems to mostly be feature parity, but you can't do custom workflows. And then there's Monday.com. I can't tell you anything about it other than
Service
ads.
Service now.
It's like for Jira planning, there was something called, it's an angle or something like that that worked really well for task ticketing, but Jira tends to run like 3 or 4 different major use cases. And so in most cases, you have different products for those kinds of things.
Excel. Yeah, actually,
Excel.
the place I've been at, a lot of the senior devs be, I'll go to Excel.
There's a
sheet,
box
this is
for
best."
That's what I'm seeing now.
You know, I might actually prefer that. So
Honestly, the real is the mic was
kind of forward there.
all of Excel sheets.
But so it was kind of interesting. I was actually off this week for personal reasons. And I kind of came back to a literal dumpster fire. It was 2020 repeating itself, but just to my company as a whole. And as it says, everything was in Jira, everything was in Confluence. We literally went back to the Stone Age of, wow, is Wesley here? Does he remember how to do that? Well, let's hope he does. Thankfully, we had enough bus factor cross training in there to where this really wasn't an issue. But what's really interesting is I work for a consulting company. I have to track my time and log against Jira tickets. I can't log against Jira tickets. Thankfully, at the time, the tool that I was using allowed you to link it up later, but that does become an issue for a lot of people because like some people were legitimately writing it down on paper or in Excel saying, I spent this much time on this issue, I'll go make a ticket later. And thankfully all time got tracked there too. But probably the best part is on call just magically disappeared. They deleted Offschain. Like I wasn't on call and I never was on that rotation, but from everyone that was there, like, oh, thank God. But yeah. So what can we learn here? By the way, everyone knows what clip or TV show this is from, right? Mythbusters. Compact.
Sorry, I didn't see every episode of Mythbusters. I'll get on that.
Oh, it's one of my favorite shows ever. It's freaking great. So what can we learn? So Atlassian didn't actually communicate to their customers for like a couple days. Any of us should never make that mistake, like straight up. I can understand like a couple of hours, but not communicating for days on end and saying, well, let's just hope that they go check the status page. I don't want to freaking check the outages.net mailing list and say, oh, I wonder what's going on with Atlassian right now. We're gonna find their status page. That's what happened if they deleted their own. It's kind of like when S3 failed, their status page stopped working. So we all go to stoplying.cloud.
So it's interesting. So everybody knows that I worked for Amazon Web Services for the last 2 years. And the space of that 2 years has been, a few outages I've been involved with, but yeah, before I can't communicate out, like it has to be, it's tiered, it has to go from various people. Right?
Yeah.
And then I get the NDA communication, customers with NDA can have this, public, I'll let somebody else handle that.
Yeah, but like, I also work for an AWS partner, so we don't work together at all, but I know exactly what you're talking about. But even Amazon still communicates that within like an hour or two. This was days.
Yeah.
And that's like one of the biggest lessons I think like we as IT pros can take away from this.
There's also, I'm on a Slack channel where everything, like there's the threshold, there's not every incident, but
Yeah.
everything that reaches that threshold is logged.
Mhm.
So I've got the option to watch that, talk to my computer,
Your
my
computer,
customers, talking to my customers and out of channel. Just say, hey, be aware, like something's happening.
yeah, that's fair. But also like from Atlassian's blog post, and we'll scroll through it here, but they're now working on actual DR plans. For a company this size, they probably should have already had a better, more proper DR plan, and they should have been able to fail over in a faster manner. And one of the things that they discuss in here is they didn't really understand how the full application stack worked at the end of the day. So they had to go figure that out before they could start restoring. Like storing your application architecture in Lucidchart and having that as a PDF tucked away in someone's desk on a flash drive is probably a really good backup strategy at this point. Say, someone find Harold, we need this flash drive. And then we talked about monitoring and system warnings earlier. How could we better improve our monitoring? And then more specific APIs. Dear God, this is probably the most important thing. Don't have one API or SQL database or SQL table that contains or the ability for you to delete your apps and sites all at the same time. Someone was just lazy at that point. It's like, oh, we don't want to go figure it out, just delete it. No, you shouldn't do that ever. And like a lot of providers, heck, even Microsoft has mastered this one we all have hatred of this Microsoft for some rhyme or reason. But SharePoint has a freaking recycle bin feature in it. So does OneDrive. You can restore ransomware backups to a degree on it, but not like a full company-wide one. But anyways.
So I wonder, as a customer, if there's something you can do, like in the past, I had used Confluence as an API to automatically update the information in Confluence. We had a lot of script generated pages.
I remember hearing about that, but what happens when your Confluence goes away?
Well, then typically you have to get or something else, right?
Not if you're writing so like I use Terraform docs a lot.
Yeah.
So that would be valid, but sometimes you're saying, here's this program that can't be automated. Let me take screenshots and write down how to install it.
So we have kind of two classes, like one where scripts collect data, right, and update a page. I guess that should be legit. But if I'm tracking deployments, I guess I could, but I never could.
Yeah. And that's kind of the thing too. You can go in, you can download that script, you can modify it or branch off, modify it locally, say, give me a CSV export so I can do my job right. But by the time you do that, that's something you or I would probably do, but next door coworker may not want to.
We've used wiki systems in the past where you could export the entire contents. Everybody carried a flash drive with whatever you last updated. It's probably 6 months out of date at this point. But so that's an option too. I don't know that you could do that with Confluence.
I've kind of done something similar. Actually, multiple previous institutions. I've had a cron job that goes with API key. It does a PDF export of everything under a certain tree, grabs those PDFs and just keeps them around on a sitting in my home directory on a server just in case.
I mean, honestly, Aaron, that's a totally legitimate backup and DR strategy. Especially when you're so far, it's literally putting all your eggs in one basket. A lot of companies have all their eggs in one basket. And there's a Knoxville company, and we're gonna be nameless right now, that was also affected by this. Keep in mind, I'm one of 400 lucky people that got to deal with, or 400 lucky companies that got all the crap deleted. Like we were talking to our clients saying, oh, do you hear about the Atlassian outage? They're like, what Atlassian outage? Our crap still works. Like, oh, geez, great. Now we look like morons.
Well, I mean, wouldn't that be because there is two different products? There's that, like, you can go with Atlassian, it's online, whatever they hosted, then there's the self-hosting, right?
So they're discontinuing it on premise in the next
Oh,
couple
they're
of years.
discontinuing
What they've
Well,
done is
sorry, I think they're going to data
Yes.
or enterprise, but they're discontinuing one of the two on premise.
So for the longest time, they had server and data center.
Yeah,
The per head cost was the same, but the minimum buy in data center was higher. Data center got you active, and J, they just use nasal gas internally. And you got, I think priority support and automated DR site stuff.
Yeah, because like from what I've seen for the past few companies have been in the last 10 years, almost all of them have like the offsite version. Like I don't
Yeah.
want to have your guys on like cloud stuff. They have a whole bunch of auditing.
you should look at the
Big
latest
difference.
exchange licensing.
Yeah,
Server
yeah.
licenses were perpetual. So you got to keep whatever the last version you had of the license was, even if you didn't renew. The data center licenses aren't like that. And I think the data center licenses start at 500 users and the on-prem license started at 10. And it was like, they used to have this thing where you could get 10 users for 10 minutes.
Yeah,
I think you still get that.
Yeah, they do it. Well,
and just kind of like, one thing I really don't like about Atlassian is they are on SSO.tax. If anyone's familiar with that website, you have to pay, I think it's $2 a user a month for Atlassian access, so you can actually use SSO. The security enterprise feature that's supposed to be free for everyone. Assholes.
That was the title of your talk, was thought it doesn't back up your stuff.
Yeah.
But they restored it, they did have backups.
Andy, I wrote this in bed at 10 p.m. last night.
I
I literally called Ben and said, hey, Ben, I'm working on my shelves in my closet and I fixed my water heater the day before and the day prior to that. Can you wordsmith an abstract for me? And he said, well, I'm at Chili's right now. I was like, well, that's funny. I'm going to be like 200 feet from you because Home Depot. But so Ben and I coordinated this late last night.
So it'd be fair to say that you can't really trust the backup strategies and recovery processes of a cloud service.
Yeah.
The expectation that they're running a really tight ship, the kind of ship you wish you were running, but you're not. Because they wish they were running it too, but no, they're not.
Daniel Dewey's home lab has more resiliency than Atlassian.
Daniel Dewey's home lab has more power usage than my entire house.
Well, it sounds like they're a backup strategy, but they didn't have a disaster recovery strategy.
DC.
This is, I mean, I'm sure there's significant amounts of scale in there too. Right?
There
It
is.
makes this more difficult, for sure.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that a lot of us can only A, dream of, like how to do this, and B, dream of working for someone that can accomplish this kind of skill. Like Atlassian was a startup, what, 7 years ago or something?
And they're publicly traded now.
Yeah. They also are in Australia and backdoor encryption laws. I'm not sure how all that plays in.
It gets weird because they're multinational now, and I think they're not incorporated in Australia anymore.
That would be a fun one to find
I
out.
think they're actually incorporated in Ireland now, and they're listed on the NASDAQ.
Why?
Oh, I can answer that one.
That one's changing. Getting speed.
It's still good though.
No, that's not why.
It's still not.
Well, it's going with the like,
You don't have to continue
tax
to want it.
but anyways, so I kind of stole my thunder on this one, unfortunately. But seriously, like you all can fill out a JIRA ticket like on April 5th this year, that'd be fantastic. Oh, that means I have no work. So like, I'm so sorry. Anyways, this is the end of the talk on it. I hope it was good for how little effort I put into it right now.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm impressed that you made that timeline of like 2 weeks in one night.
Yeah, no, that's totally copy and paste on the website, man. Yeah, that would be really impressive. I can't even do that on a day job.
Like, what tool are you using to make timeline?
This stuff is hard.
It really is.
I've worked with a lot of customers, and it is easier than ever to build a highly resilient, multi-region, whatever. And it's still difficult. It's still really difficult.
It is.
You get that one piece of software that just doesn't do active passive, you have to like wrap a ton of stuff around because their idea of high availability is a sand replication and a copy and paste maker.
Ooh, I know a SAN software that's very close to that. And it's actually very cloud right now. But anyways, there, I did want to go through this really quick.
Signature, they make their money on the selling licenses and things, not keeping your data, just getting the original one. And the fast growing company, that's what they're looking for, the money. So.
Right.
Just worrying about getting you as a customer, not keeping.
Oh, I also love, we're the only ones.
Salesforce, they got
It's
you
still
all.
easy, but I can't tell where they're.
We're the only option.
Open company, no bullshit is what their company motto is. They're,
Wow.
Yeah.
Their product for free.
Let's see that.
you get Atlassian for free?
Yep, yeah,
Huh.
and Stash, a bit bucket.
Is it Atlassian cloud?
Yeah.
That you're
Well, we
crafting?
were on-prem, but we just migrated that pretty big process.
It really is. I've done that one.
We were only using open LDAP.
Yeah.
So you had to move to SAML. No, we just had to make it.
But anyways, I just kind of want to go through this right here. So they kind of came up with,
What was their lessons learned?
so that's what I was showing right here. What are they going to do to prevent situations like this in the future? Make a recycle bin, aka be Windows, accelerate their VR program to actually have it. I remember doing VR. It is painful.
At my previous employer, every year, this is the year we're gonna do VR. We're serious this year, we're gonna do it.
So one of my previous employers, I did VR quarterly. I got banished to another building for like 2 to 3 weeks out of every quarter. And we ran DR in an isolated environment for the longest time without internet, so you couldn't actually test anything. But so some systems were like, we gotta go reconfigure it like this. I remember we broke domain controllers and they were literally sitting there like a child in their terrible twos throwing freaking tantrums at the domain controller. And the honest to God solution was, let's get it done before lunch. When we go to lunch, and then when we get back, the domain controllers are done with their tantrums. So they start working. It was like, what? And it was like, wow, that actually worked. What the hell? But also what Atlassian did in here is they're working on their incident management and how can they recover from this in the future? Like, this is a great exercise to run. You can run a tabletop exercise internally and say, oh, let's go delete one of our own things and see how that works. And you can run through the theory. Humans, from what I can see, are actually pretty darn good when you say, tell me everything that could go wrong, because we all love to chat and speak a lot of bullshit at the same time. But you can identify, like, you got Todd in the corner, it's like, what about this? And it reminds me of that scene from Silicon Valley season 1 finale. I'm not going to go any further than that. But Guilfoyle's like, oh yeah, I guess that does actually matter. But anyways.
Yeah, I mean, nothing against like tabletop exercises, but like these tend to be complex systems.
Yeah.
I don't think you're gonna tabletop exercise this.
No, but you can at least start to think about the theory of it rather than, I've worked at several companies where it's like, let's pray to God that never happens.
It's a good idea to tabletop it, think about it, and try it.
Yeah.
It's a first step.
It is, and that's what matters. It's like, heck, even sometimes checking that audit checkbox saying, we thought about this, is more than what most companies do.
And, actually, this was in architecture I had.
Market texture.
Architecture, right?
Gosh.
Our marketing architecture. Anyway, the comment was like, most things that go wrong with architectures, aren't because somebody made the wrong decision. Because they didn't consider something. How many times did you hear like, oh, I never thought about that.
Yep. And that's like sitting there just thinking,
I never thought about what happens if our GPS system caught this signal.
I don't even want to know. Jonathan, we all know we're not going to use on-prem. I'm so sorry. One of our grand comments.
Yeah, see, on-prem, telling you, go offline.
But here, I'm gonna stop the recording here, but there's something just fun I want to share, because this is absolutely fantastic.